Now, a near end does not seem on the horizon for the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. This, as Israel says, it is still preparing for its ground invasion into Gaza. While world leaders are discussing and negotiating over the conflict, however, a consensus does not appear to be workable so far. Meanwhile, the human suffering continues. In the latest, IDF says ground forces backed by fighter jets and drones carried out a nighttime targeted raid in central Gaza as it prepares for a land invasion. As part of the activity, IDF aircraft and artillery struck terror targets belonging to Hamas in the enclave. Israel Defense Forces also say they have killed 3 Hamas militants who were struck by their fighter jets. These militants played a significant role in the invasion and murderous attack against Israel on the 7th of October, as per the IDF. And they are considered to be the most significant brigade of Hamas. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry claims that more than 7,000 Palestinians have been killed so far in the war. The ministry's toll includes more than 2,700 minors and at least 1,500 women. Hamas also released the names of those who have been killed. Speaking of the expected ground offensive, Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, has said that it is not far off. He added that Israel will carry out the operation when the conditions are right in order to strike Hamas. Gallant also talked about tensions with Hezbollah on the border with Lebanon. He said Israel has no interest in expanding the war.
אנחנו מלחמה בחזית הדרומית כנגד חמאס. אנחנו מוכנים לכל התפתחות בצפון. חיזבאללה סופג נפגעים רבים. יחד עם זה אין לנו עניין להרחיב את המלחמה. היעד שלנו הוא ניצחון במלחמה והחזרתם של החטופים. התמרון יגיע ולא ירחק היום והוא יקרה. זה יקרה כאשר ייווצרו התנאים המתאימים על מנת להכות את ארגון החמאס, ולאחר שנשלים את משימתנו באש, כאשר הדבר הזה יקרה, אתם תראו אותו ותבינו את עוצמתו.
And while the defense minister said that Israel did conduct a military drill close to its border with Lebanon on Thursday, clashes with Iran-backed Hezbollah group have been frequent since the Israel-Hamas war broke out. More than 40 Hezbollah militants have been killed in the borderlands so far, while Israel's military says at least 7 of its soldiers have been killed. And as Israeli strikes continue on Gaza, Libya's parliament has called for halting oil exports to those who back Israel. The parliament demands that Israeli aggression must stop, else the country must move forward with the decision. Meanwhile, aid agencies have accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war, as sufficient aid is not entering Gaza. Organization Oxfam says only 2% of the usual supplies of food had been delivered to Gaza since the border was closed at the beginning of the crisis. The UN also says far fewer supplies have arrived in the past week in Gaza than would normally be delivered. Hamas has meanwhile said at least 50 hostages held by the group have been killed so far. Now, these hostages have been killed in the continued Israeli strikes in Gaza. Speaking of hostages, a senior Qatari negotiator told in an interview that civilians being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza could be released within days. He cautioned, however, that any escalation in the conflict could jeopardize those efforts. Diplomacy and negotiations around the war continue. Now, a senior Hamas delegation has traveled to Moscow to meet Russian foreign ministry officials. This is the organization's first high-profile international visit since its October 7 attacks on Israel. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister is in Moscow as well, and the three leaders held a trilateral meet as per a picture posted by Hamas. EU leaders also met in Brussels on Thursday to discuss the situation in West Asia. In a declaration agreed at a summit, the leaders expressed the gravest concern for the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza. Now, they called for pauses in the fighting so that humanitarian aid could enter Gaza. Now, the debate on the war also continues at the United Nations. The United Nations General Assembly held an emergency meeting on Thursday to discuss the dire situation. Representatives from Israel and Arab countries exchanged sharp accusations at the discussion in UNGA, showing no signs of consensus. Now, Iran's foreign minister, in a sharp remark at the UN, warned that the US will not be spared from the fire if war in Gaza continues. And now the US military has struck 2 facilities in eastern Syria used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and affiliated groups. Pentagon also says that about 900 additional US troops are heading to West Asia to protect US personnel amid a surge in attacks in the region by Iran-affiliated groups. US troops have been attacked at least 12 times in Iraq and 4 times in Syria in the past week. The Pentagon said US forces were targeted earlier on Thursday in Iraq as well, but the attack failed. At least 24 American military personnel have been wounded in these attacks.